This week, U.S. web companies scramble as the EU kicks our ass with 4 little letters, GDPR. So what the hell is that?
We're about to find out. Then, while no one was looking, Netflix just got bigger than Comcast. Wow.
And this week in venture capital, crazy cash for pets. What could go wrong?
Could be pets.com all over again. We will see. I'm DeRose.
I'm Steve Rosenbaum, and this is Future Forward. Let's launch. All right, GDPR. First of all, how many emails did you get? How many?
Lots of emails, although to be honest, and this is a future subject, I get a lot of those things going into my junk, some of which really shouldn't be, but I have been able to separate them. How about you?
I probably got 200.
All right. Well, look, you want to start with loving, hating, and then jump into it?
Absolutely. Okay.
So this week, summer season, lots of holidays, lots of flags all over the place. I am going to focus this one on government sites. Sounds a little boring, but in truth, there's some incredible value that's been created out of both the goodwill, some investment, and just the logic of how people-powered government can be something pretty incredible in the internet age. You and I have been around and have even kind of advised on some of what's happened in the New York area, and San Francisco does a good job too. I'm loving this week still nyc.gov. It was plowed forward by Bloomberg with a very no-nonsense attitude that you could do a lot here. And in this era of emerging big data, when having a critical mass of data means you can start doing things. They and other cities have done a good job at making a reasonable amount of the data available, and then having really good services and interesting little wrinkles in what you could do when you go to those sites. So that's loving. The flip side, more in my day-to-day life, and I really would like to hear some of your feedback too, Steve, is at a real state and local level. And I'm a guy who lives in Westchester and grew up in Irvington, now live in Chappaqua. These are historically very well-off and forward-thinking towns and neighborhoods. And the Westchester County site and the respective town sites for these suburban towns, they're just terrible. They're an embarrassment. And it really shouldn't be that way, because at a local level, we should be doing so much more with this stuff. And so, shame on the local sites and the lack of, you really, when it comes down to it, it's lack of being able to organize and put resources towards it, probably more than anything.
What's worse, the websites or the mobile sites?
Oh, that's you know what? It's a cascade. The websites are bad enough, but then they have not done the most basic thinking around, 2011 version of responsive design, just for starters. But you would think that in mobile and with location, there would be so much to do, but they should not be ceding this market to Google and, Yelp and all these others. There's just too much going on at a local and civic level. Facebook as well, right? Facebook's moms groups name the town are very impressive and useful, and they shouldn't get all the dough.
So to me, it's really simple. You've got talent coming out of school, young talent, got a great idea. I'm a developer. I want to, let's see, I could go to a startup, make 80 grand right out of school, and then maybe own some stock and we go to the moon. Or I could go work for city government, get $35,000 and sit in a cubicle.
You know what? You just nailed it. And honestly, I'm a person who's done a lot of thinking and proselytizing around taking high school and college age kids with sophistication in social media and putting them towards nonprofits and, that kind of work. But why not at the local government level as well, because I think people don't realize this is just not a cash out kind of service thing. This is a way of generating income and at least paying your way for sure. So it's a shame. We'll let you see some. You'll be able to see some of these screens to get an idea of what good and bad means, and it needs to be worked on.
All right. So let's get to GDPR, because I'm just fascinated by how, maybe this is my American-centric worldview, but it's like, generally speaking, when it comes to innovations on the internet and policy, we've been leading the way. And this really is the European Union saying, you know what? And it was interesting, I literally, when did those four letters show up on our, our mental map? 2 weeks ago? I
Two
mean,
weeks ago, followed by
right?
emails that looked confusing.
Right, because I think the original thing that I was hearing from internet companies is, well, we're gonna cleave off Europe, and we'll give the privacy stuff that they want to Europe, but in the U.S. we're gonna keep doing what we're doing. And then
Yeah.
they were like, yeah, no, that doesn't work.
Well, it's reminiscent of, we talked about this, I think, in a past episode of how antitrust issues around Microsoft and then Google have fallen out over the last 20 years. And in a world where this was operating systems and hardware somewhat centric, you could see the literal balkanization of those things. But in the world of the internet, it's a clusterfuck. And, as you and I were saying offline, we're not Europeans, but we're getting a lot of these mails because it's all being set up. I would only quibble, and I don't know that you disagreeing, it's just a semantic thing, with who's kind of being progressive and leading, because I think Europe has a history of sort of saying from an institutional and a state level, we don't give a fuck. We're just going to put these laws in place and we're going to be the first ones to do it to protect civilians and to protect what feels fair, technology progress, or tripwires be damned. And so, it's going to be quite an issue, but some of this stuff is a long time coming.
So general data protection regulation.
Yep.
You have to rehearse that a couple of times. It doesn't roll. It's not a sexy name, but as I understand it, and it's not a directive. So all the EU Union members don't have to deploy it the same way.
Yeah, that's right. Yep, you've got multiple levels of that. And by the way, on the acronym, it will not live because it's got GDP in it. It's just, it doesn't really make sense. Things like COPA that have been around forever, at least, are something unique enough. That's the Child Online Protection Act. I would just say this, Steve, that the kinds of data and what we're talking about, this is all going to fall out in terms of, a lot of the security stuff is leads from financial and transactional institutional pressure. But I think in some ways that's not what people care as much about. I mean, that's just basic encryption on transactions and things versus use of our personal privacy, transparency on how our data is used, and shouldn't we own or have access to stuff, right?
Yeah, but I mean, you say that like we should all know that. I mean,
no, we shouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, it's just interesting to me, whenever people in the U.S. talk about, fake news or this, and I say, well, maybe there should be legislation. And then we look at our government and go, yeah, well, they're not going to do that. Or if they do, it's going to be for nefarious purposes. But it seems like, I mean, when we wake up and GDPR is completely deployed as it's started on Friday and it's moving through the week, like, is the web going to be a safer, better place?
Well, it's going to have zero impact at first, and we certainly won't know. It's a little bit like Homeland Security and, the threats that never got carried out that we don't find out about. But it's going to be hell because logistically it's going to throw some services and sites into kind of, awkward mismanagement and a few things like that. It is really hard for me to figure out whether it's going to have any impact beyond that. Is it a little maybe like Y2K, right? It's sort of who knows?
Yeah, no, I think but I'm willing to argue it's better than that because like the whole European right to be forgotten thing,
Right.
I mean, if God forbid you did something bad in your career 25 years ago and you ran over a cat in the driveway or, something, like the idea that your entire life comes to the top of search engine results, even if it's, so let's say, for example, you were accused of something and it turned out to not be true and you went to court and you're absolved. All of that history still floats around out there. So I guess I don't exactly understand, does the right to be forgotten mean that you can now go to Google and say, wait, I don't want that, and I don't want that information about me remembered?
I think that you're exactly right, and I didn't mean to minimize it because this is a big issue. It's more a question of will they see it at first, but you're right in the sense that how it exactly falls out will be interesting because on the one hand, it's you could never erase it from the million places or the source places. And on the other hand, if you do have the ability to get Google to have would-be results not show up in web searches, I see what that would be, but I don't understand how that practically gets carried out. This is going to be a big issue over the next few years. DNA testing and the capture of this California rapist had to do with something that's a little dicey in the end, because it was authorities doing DNA searches from public genealogy forums without any warrants or anything else, and then connecting slight matches to family tree searches, that process of, there's a lot of things that is not so far from, what we hope, one of our teenage kids doesn't get caught doing on camera that shows up on their LinkedIn someday.
So Digiday, which I wouldn't think of as the funniest website in the world, came up with a really good post and found all of the GDPR jokes on the web and gathered them together into a meme. And there were a couple I liked, so I thought I'd read one or two of them. I particularly like, this is from Joe at mutablejoe.com, and he says, he's making a list, he's checking it twice, he's going to find out who's naughty or nice. Santa Claus is in contravention of Article 4 of the General Data Protection Regulation Act.
Excellent. And the more obvious one, which I'll read if you have the quote on, do you know a good GDPR consultant? Yes. Can you pass me their email address? No. It's a simple one. That's been used in lots of different other kind of areas through history.
So I'm going to put the big thumbs up for GDPR. I think, and I think that, this is kind of part of a larger political spectrum that we're dealing with, which is, other parts of the world are going, all right, if you're not going to lead, we'll lead. We're good. You're not going to step in and fix this thing. The idea that we get to necessarily just, throw our hands up in the air on things. By the way, you could argue it's the exact same thing that's happening with global warming, and Paris, right? I mean, U.S. said we're dropping out, and the rest of the world said, yeah, well, we'll move ahead. We'll bring in California and New York, and we'll sort it out without you.
That's right. And dropping out or being second may mean other people can make mistakes, but also may mean you're not at the table when these kind of things get defined. So I think, the worry to me is that the sub-bullets of what all GDPR means are each such colossal issues that I'm not sure how things get all figured out. But I applaud and think this is kind of necessary. The one that I think is the sneaky one that amidst all this that I think is going to emerge someday is, your personal rights to have access to your data in a kind of unilateral, and this isn't just to stop other people, it's because increasingly, I can, make money or do good things with my own data. So shouldn't I, have the rights to sell it as much or use it as much as anyone else? So I think there are some issues around that, and it's going to be led by things like personal health data. But, again, I always go back to the same thing. Why shouldn't I have a sophisticated record of everything, Amazon knows about me?
So let's move on to Netflix, because this one really caught me by surprise. I mean, I haven't been paying a lot of attention to the Netflix market cap number, and if you look at the chart that Recode posted, I mean, let's be fair. I mean, Comcast is also from 2012, 2018 going up pretty dramatically. They're both going up. I mean, that being said, though, Netflix beating out Comcast, if only for a moment, is a pretty important and I think, kind of a red letter day.
Yeah, I think it's a marker. I honestly have not paid as much attention to the media stocks, so it doesn't really surprise me that much. I mean, I think what we forget in looking at startups next to each other is there are ones that are truly 800-pound gorillas like Amazon that are controlling vast portions of their category versus a superlative performer like Netflix that yet still only adds up to whatever single-digit percentage of your video of overall video viewing in the world or whatever. And so, but that being said, they are it may just be that this is a moment in time, because the question is, can Netflix, and we have this in some of our Q&A follow-up here, is Netflix able to now perform as well when they're not the only game in town? We're about to see 15 different services start to try to emerge, some of which has already been out there and have reinforced their efforts. And, can they coexist in a world? And what is happening as cord cutting becomes more than just something for millennials? It's an exploding, diffuse world.
So Netflix at $11 a month
Yep.
really needs to make me happy with one show a month in order for me to be happy. Back in the olden days, back in the HBO days, the big concern was churn, right? Because if your favorite show ended and there wasn't something there, you'd wait a month, and then maybe you'd watch a movie, maybe you wouldn't. But to me, so my wife and I went and we saw Ruth Bader Ginsburg, RGB
Yes.
documentary. Terrific, by the way, must see.
It's on my
Thumbs up.
list. I'm very
Amazing.
excited.
Ticket for her was $19. Ticket for me was $19. It was one of those theaters, the Landmark Theater with the fancy chairs.
Sure. Nice screen, nice sound.
So right. $40 to see a movie for the two of us, minus $11 a month for us to see a show. I'm way more likely to dial down my theatrical, than I am to, it's going to take a really disappointing, series of failures on Netflix part before I would ever even consider canceling.
I 100% agree. And let's dispense with the first part, because, the evidence over the last 20 years has reinforced over and over again that there's an intangible about this sort of see a movie in a theater, going out, joint experience, et cetera, that does seem to, sure, we'll watch a few less things maybe, but for those of us that are culture people, video people, movie people, we'll still go to the theater. I think that you're nailed it on the Netflix. There is Netflix, unless the rug totally gets pulled out from under them. And the thing is, their independent stuff has now gotten so strong that they're almost impervious to not having network stuff and HBO stuff and everything else. They're like the best deal in town. What we don't know as time evolves in the next 3 years is whether we as consumers can reconcile the value in these different things. It sometimes makes me scratch my head. What is it that I'm paying for my ISP, my FiOS service, or my cell service? Or, again, I still get cable because it means I can just use my sign-in on all my apps for the cable channel apps, to just get all that stuff for free. But should I be on Hulu? Should I, Amazon has been smartly not decoupled from just Amazon and Amazon Prime itself. But what happens when Disney tries to launch? That's a bigger question to me. Will any of us bite?
So, I think Disney is a muddled brand. I do. By the way, just the other thing about the Netflix numbers that are interesting are they added 7 million new subs in just Q1, and Comcast shedded about 300,000. So
Yep, it makes sense. And look, Comcast's strategy is not only, it's about the things that they own and the NBC properties and, all that other stuff. So I think it's look, you and I can come from a content legacy in a way, and we all know how in the old .com area days and even early social media, content was so undervalued. And now we're kind of in an era where it's amazing. I have some screenwriter friends, and they just can't stop working. They can't find for vacation because there's too much money to be made.
So not to rain on their parade, but we should just, there was some coverage that said that Netflix is uninvestable.
See, I don't know what that means. Do they mean as investing in the stock? I suppose that's what they mean. Or when they say that, is that what a fund does at this point? I don't know.
No, they were just saying essentially that they're at the height of their value.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of upside left.
Yeah. we'll just have to see. I do think your point about Disney may merit something further down the road, because the brand versus the collective assets, especially once they finish, if they do, closing out owning those Fox properties. We don't think of ESPN next to the Disney brand, but it's all under that. I mean, are they going to call that? What will they call that, and how will they set up the brand for whatever that is? These are. It's borderline going to start to get a little ugly. I think Netflix's growth has been because they are reinforcing the fact that there's too many things that you would miss by not getting on Netflix that are Netflix onlys. That's their big thing. And the one place where we know Jeff Bezos has gnashed his teeth a little is failure to get the Amazon Prime, independent content stuff as fully off the ground.
Yep. By the way, Disney having a bad weekend. Solo, the numbers are soft. I guess the China numbers are terrible.
I'm surprised that they didn't I feel like the marketing was a little soft on it. I don't quite.
The marketing was non-existent.
Yeah, I
non-existent.
This could be part of a little belt tightening, or maybe Star Wars, the franchise that is owned, has to clear the space for the core property stuff. And I think this winter we're going to see the number 9. I can't remember, but anyway, it's hard to know.
It was weird. And they didn't seem to have a big name associated. It was all new actors. I don't know. All right. Yeah. So let's get to pets. So I am a dog owner.
Me too.
And we're going on a trip a couple of weeks. And so we wanted to book a dog walker to come. They come in and they feed the dogs and they walk them around the block, and they do it twice a day. We've in the past used a service called Rover, and had a very good experience for a number of years. And there was a whole dog-centric thing you could do. You could go online, you could tell them what your neighborhood was. They would show you the pictures and the stories of the walkers. You could reach out to them through the service. They would come and do what's called a meet and greet, where they would meet the dog and meet you, and you'd make sure you were comfortable with them. It was great. And they had an app that was really good, and it tracked the dog walk, and they sent you pictures. It was all very, very crazy dog owner centric. Something happened, and I think I know what. And they wanted to automate a lot of stuff. And so they started doing instant walks where you say, hey, I need a dog walk, and they send someone. And you're supposed to just be happy with whoever they send you. Then there's no chance, you don't get to pick the person, you don't get to, So I just think they made a terrible decision.
I agree.
And by the way, they've raised an enormous amount of money. They've raised $180 million. So I thought, you know what? Fine, you're going to treat me like now I'm just, I'm going to let a stranger into my house to walk my dogs without being home, without having met them in person. They kept saying, oh, they're all vetted, don't have to worry. I was like, bullshit. So we moved to their competitor, Rover. Or WAG. So Rover, we moved to WAG. And they were worse.
Interesting. Also raised money. Also, startup.
Raised $300 million. And so the other day we were trying to book dog walker and went on and talked and the other thing that's weird, and gee, this is really surprising. They all have websites, but almost inevitably they push you to their app. They won't talk to you on the phone. They won't talk to you on the website. They'll only talk to you on the app. But then the app has limitations, and you end up on the phone with them.
It's a misconstruing of, obviously, as you talked through it, there's a lot of things in the backdrop, but the comps that you kind of feel at the front are like Airbnb or Uber and a few other things, but those are the ones. And look, I think you nailed a big distinction. Airbnb has a wonderful app and it's great, but, like a lot of travel sites and a lot of sort of hard business planning, in your life that you use the desktop. And so the Airbnb desktop, is a reasonably robust thing. Uber, there's no reason. It's completely ad hoc thing. I don't even know what their website even looks like. Never been there. They have to reconcile those things. It surprises me that they wouldn't be a little bit better at that. And but I also think you're speaking to something that maybe, we talked about local food services a few months ago or a few shows ago. And a lot of these services that seem like rocking startups that could scale massively have multiple problems at a localized level. They tend to start in places like New York. Even going to other cities is difficult, but then going to the rest of the world and the rest of the country, suburbia, small cities, communities, they don't map to each other literally in the same way. So they have to solve that problem, I would think. And I would guess that they can't reconcile those things. They're just trading off against all the rest. And tell me this. Is it like Uber in that there's a fight over, the drivers? Who's going to own them? Is it going to be Lyft? Are they going to go get medallions? Are they going to do that? And why isn't that better done?
So I'll finish my WAG story because it'll tell you what the real problem is, I think. So we tried to book a WAG walker, and it used to be you could book 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. or 6 a.m., whatever. Now you can only book 8 a.m. So I said to the person on the phone, what happened to 7 a.m.? They said, oh, well, we found a lot of the walkers didn't want to get up that early, and we don't have any people answering our support lines until 8 a.m. So I'm like, wait, you raised $150 million and you've said, no, we're just going to try. So you can feel someone in a whiteboard going, we want our customers to behave like this. So the fact that our dogs get walked at 7 a.m., sorry, now they get walked at 8 if you use us. So finally I said, well, what about this? What about a meet and greet for the walker? They said, well, we don't usually do that, but you can talk to them directly. So I arranged to have the person who's going to come walk our dogs come to the house. So he shows up, supposed to be here at 11 o'clock in the morning. He's 11:30. He's half an hour late. He walks in. He immediately, it's clear he's not a dog person. He doesn't like the dogs. I mean, he pets them, whatever. But so we say to him, did you grow up with dogs? No. Do you own a dog? No. So why are you doing this? He goes, well, I'm moving out of town in a couple of weeks and I just need some extra money.
Oh, that is terrible. Yeah,
terrible.
So that's a big deal. They're not. But you also noted something that's really important. Even for a small market, relatively speaking, the dog walking market compared to cars and rental homes, the fact that you've got to let somebody into your own home at a certain level in most or many instances, that's something far beyond either Uber or Airbnb. Nobody has to do that unless they're renting their own place, which is different. That's the income side. So there may be some things that are just fraught in this category that make it really, really challenging. And I also wonder why some of these things aren't just better off underneath a Fiverr or an Angie's List or something else, because they're kind of gig economy, odd jobs, even if they have a segment that should be about people that love dogs.
So I think, the thing that I'm convinced of is when you raise $300 million, you need to say to the guy who's writing you the check for $300 million, I have a better than reasonable chance of returning 10 times your money.
Yeah,
right.
That's right.
It's a 10. So 300 million times 10 is a big number
for a category that's two subsets of a category, which is to say, the pet industry, right? It's not. I don't see it. I'm not sure where that valuation comes from. It's interesting.
So as a customer, so let me tell you what I did. I went down in our building to the bulletin board and I found the name of a local dog walker. I took her card off the bulletin board, called her up and hired her. That's what I did.
Yeah.
She's in the neighborhood. She came by and said hi. She's lovely. She likes our dogs. Our dogs like her. We know each other she knows other people in the building. She's not going to mess with our apartment. But it's the fact that WAG and Rover don't understand, to your point, that this is not apartments or taxis. I think that money, I would short both those companies if I could.
Yeah. And it's funny, and it's shorting them because of wrong moves and misjudgments in a very, very vibrant category. This whole freelance/gig economy, I mean, I am a true believer, and every bit of data says if you look at we as professionals, we're all going to have multiple jobs throughout our careers, and many, many, many people are going to be making money 5 or 6 different ways at a given time. And how that's going to fall out with these services and capabilities is a big deal. But dog walking is a very specific thing, and so I don't know. It's something that's always been a reasonable kind of a classified kind of market. You always had the ability to kind of find people, and if you don't need a lot of tech mojo on that, I don't know.
By the way, my wife describes it as the same thing as childcare. If a company said, we're going to automate childcare and we're going to do such a good job screening the babysitters, you don't even have to meet them. You can just leave your kids locked in the apartment and the keys under the mat, and the babysitter will show up and you'll never have to say hello. Like, that's just never going to happen.
Well, yes, although I would split hairs on it, having since we moved to the suburbs with our third child, we've used a thing called Au Pair in America, which almost merits a love it versus hating it, because for something like that, which is a little more systematic, it's a little like applying to colleges, right? You could see how the superstructure of the web and social media and photos and references and a one size fits all can kind of spread pretty well. On the other hand, my wife and I couldn't go out last night to meet friends because we couldn't get a babysitter at a local level, which feels absurd because there's so many kids who would do anything for $20 an hour.
Whatever happened to good old Craigslist. Anyway, we are out of time. Have an excellent week, and we will be back for more Future Forward next week.
Rate us, review us, say hi, let us know what's going on. See you next week. Bye.